Hello and welcome to another UFC Fight Night betting card prediction and Draftkings picks. Today, we are breaking down UFC Noche Fight Night, Lopes versus Silva. This card is loaded with talent, has plenty of close matchups, and a lot of opportunities to find value both on the betting side and in our Draftkings lineups. Let's go through the entire card fight by fight, break down the styles, and see where we can make some money. Main event, Diego Lopes, Silva, featherweight. We kick off with a fantastic main event between Diego Lopes and Silva, two explosive fighters who love to put on a show. Lopes has been a rising star, showing sharp boxing combinations, big power in his hands, and the ability to mix in grappling when he needs to. He's aggressive, fights with confidence, and always goes for the finish. On the other side, Silva is also a dangerous striker, but adds a more well-rounded submission game. Silva has been improving his ground transitions, and if this fight hits the mat, he may have the edge in catching something. On the feet, Lopes might be a bit faster, but Silva has power that can change the fight in an instant. This one is tough to call and should be competitive throughout. For betting, I'm going to lean slightly towards Silva to get it done, but I'll be hedging with some plays on Lopes as a live underdog. I'll also be betting the over because I see this fight going 5 full rounds. On Draftkings, both fighters have huge upside since they are finishers, so I'll be splitting exposure, 40% Silva and 40% Diego Lopes. Alright, next up we have Rob Font taking on David Martinez in the bantamweight division. Font has long been one of the sharper boxers in the division, He uses a clean jab, mixes his combinations really well, and has experience against the very top of the division. Now, Martinez is a striker himself, but he's a bit less polished technically, and honestly, hasn't faced the same level of competition. Font has also improved his ground game over the years, which gives him multiple ways to win this fight. For betting, Font is the side I like here. I'll play him straight and also mix him into parlays. On Draftkings, Font has a chance to rack up significant volume if this fight goes deep, so I'll have 40% exposure to Font and just 8% to Martinez. Here we have Rafa Garcia versus Jared Gordon in a lightweight bout. Garcia is a durable fighter who can mix wrestling and striking, but sometimes he can get stuck in one gear and struggle if he's forced to adjust. Gordon, meanwhile, is a fighter who always pushes forward, throws in combination, and has fought some very tough names in the UFC. His experience and well-rounded skill set, honestly, give him the edge in this matchup. Alright, so my pick here is Jared Gordon. I'll be betting him straight and, adding him into a few parlays. On Draftkings, Gordon has the ability to score with pressure and pace, so I'll have about 35% exposure to him and just 10% on Garcia as a hedge. So, we've got Kelvin Gastelum versus Dustin Stoltzfus in a middleweight bout. Now this fight is a tricky one. Gastelum is the more experienced fighter by far, having gone 5 rounds with champions and former champions, and his boxing is still solid. He also has some of the best takedown defense in the division. Stoltzfus, however, does have a grappling edge here and could use that to win rounds if he's able to grind Gastelum down. The problem is, Stoltzfus has been inconsistent against top-tier competition, while Gastelum has fought at a much higher level for years. Even so, I'll be leaning slightly towards Dustin Stoltzfus to pull off the win, but this is not a confident play. I see paths for Gastelum to win, so this is a buyer beware fight for me. I won't be betting it or adding it into parlays. On Draftkings, I'll keep this light with 8% exposure to each fighter. Alexander Hernandez versus Diego Ferreira in the lightweight division. Two well-rounded veterans meet here. Hernandez is explosive early, with fast hands and a strong wrestling base. He often comes out hot, but the concern is whether he can maintain that pace over 3 rounds. Ferreira is crafty, has great cardio, and a very slick ground game, but his durability has come into question lately. If Hernandez can impose his game early, he could take over. Ferreira's best chance is to weather the early storm and drag Hernandez into deep waters. I'll side with Alexander Hernandez to get the win. My betting exposure here will be light, but I'll include him in a few small parlays. On Draftkings, Hernandez has high upside if he gets control time, so I'll have 30% on him and 20% on Ferreira. Santiago Luna versus Kwang Lei in the bantamweight division. In this fight, Luna is coming in on short notice, which always adds some unpredictability. Lee is a decent striker with a solid takedown game, but Luna brings pressure and toughness. Short-notice fighters can sometimes overperform since there's less pressure, and I think Luna has the tools to make this competitive and steal a decision. So I'll be picking Santiago Luna to get the win. I'll bet the over and parlay it a couple of times. On Draftkings, Luna's pressure could score well, so I'll have 35% exposure to him and 20% to Le. Jose Daniel Medina versus Dusko Todorovic in the middleweight division. Dusko Todorovic is the more proven fighter here. He's got the better striking, grappling, and honestly, just more overall UFC experience. Medina is still developing and doesn't bring enough to convince me he can win here. I'll be picking Dusko Todorovic, but because he's such a heavy favorite, I don't really see much betting value. On Draftkings, Todorovic should still score well if he wins, so I'll have 35% exposure to him and just 8% on Medina. Claudio Puelles versus Joaquin Silva in the lightweight division. This is one of those classic striker versus grappler matchups, you know? Silva has big knockout power and some really solid takedown defense, while Puelles is just super dangerous on the mat with his submissions. If Silva keeps it standing, he should have the advantage, but if Puelles drags this down, Silva could definitely be in trouble. This is a close one, but I'll lean towards Joaquin Silva to get it done. Betting-wise, I'll stick to the over and sprinkle it in parlays. On Draftkings, I'll split exposure, 30% Silva and 30% Puelles. Tatiana Suarez versus Amanda Lemos in the women's strawweight division. Tatiana Suarez has been one of the strongest grapplers in women's MMA, and she combines her wrestling with some really improved striking. Lemos is a dangerous striker with finishing power, but she struggles if she's consistently pressured and taken down. Suarez's game plan should be clear: get the fight to the mat, control, and hunt for a finish. So, I'll be picking Suarez to get the win here, and honestly, I'm betting the over since I see this one going long. On Draftkings, Suarez's wrestling upside makes her an excellent play, so I'll have about 40% exposure to Suarez and just 8% on Lemos. Jesus Aguilar versus Luis Gurule in the flyweight division. This is a very competitive fight. Gurule has the sharper striking, while Aguilar brings the stronger wrestling and control game. It could all come down to who dictates where the fight takes place. If it stays standing, Gurule definitely has the edge, but if Aguilar gets those takedowns, he could grind it out. My pick will be Luis Gurule, but I'll also sprinkle Aguilar in some parlays, just to cover my bases. On Draftkings, this is a good fight to target since both guys can score well, so I'll have about 35% exposure to both fighters. Zachary Reese versus Cedric Dumas at bantamweight. Honestly, I'm not too high on either fighter here, but there are still paths for both. Reese is definitely the better striker, and he's got some wrestling upside, but he's also very hittable. Dumas, on the other hand, is unpredictable, but can absolutely capitalize if Reese makes mistakes. I'll give the slight lean to Zachary Reese, but honestly, I won't be betting this one. On Draftkings, I'll just spread exposure lightly with about 20% on Reese and 15% on Dumas. Alessandro Costa versus Alden Correa at flyweight. From what I've seen on tape, Costa is the more complete fighter here. Correa has some tools, but honestly, he's still pretty raw, and I think Costa should be able to control the fight wherever it goes. I'll pick Alessandro Costa, but I won't be betting it. On Draftkings, I'll have 30% exposure on Costa and 15% on Correa. Montserrat Rendon versus Alice Pereira in women's bantamweight. This is an interesting fight. Pereira comes in as a newcomer with strong striking, while Rendon brings more UFC experience but hasn't been particularly impressive. In women's MMA, anything can happen, and this fight could be closer than it looks on paper. Still, I'll side with the newcomer Pereira to get the win. I'll be betting the over and including it in parlays. On Draftkings, I'll split exposure evenly with 25% on each fighter. Rodrigo Cezinando versus Daniil Donchenko in the welterweight division. We close out the night with Cezinando taking on Donchenko. Both men have holes in their games, but also clear ways to win. Donchenko looks like the slightly more polished fighter, but Cezinando is a dangerous underdog and capable of pulling this off. I'll pick Daniil Donchenko to win, but I'll also be betting Cezinando as a live underdog in parlays and a straight bet. On Draftkings, I'll split exposure with 30% on each fighter. That's it for the full breakdown of UFC Noche Fight Night, Lopes versus Silva. It's a tough card, but with the right bets and Draftkings strategy, I believe there's plenty of value to be found. As always, bet responsibly, don't overexpose yourself, and trust your reads. Let me know your picks down in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more fight breakdowns, and may the betting gods be with us this weekend. Good luck, and enjoy the fight.